When we talk about a country's population, we often hear words like burden or a strain on resources. But what if that's completely backwards? What if a large population isn't a problem we need to solve, but actually the single most powerful engine for a nation's success? And that is the huge shift in perspective we're digging into today.
Okay, to really get this, let's start with a puzzle. Picture two friends, growing up in the same village, starting out with pretty much the same opportunities. But one of them thrives, and the other gets left behind. So what's the one critical factor that sends their lives down two totally different tracks? That's the mystery we're about to unpack.
All right, let's meet our two friends, Sakal and Vilas. Their story isn't just about a couple of boys. It's a perfect illustration of the powerful economic forces that can shape an entire life.
So on the surface, Sakal and Vilas are starting from pretty much the exact same place. But, there are these invisible forces already at play, getting ready to push them down two wildly different paths.
First up, we've got Sakal. His parents, they didn't just see a son, they saw an investment. They made sure he went to school, and they even took out a loan so he could get a vocational degree in computers. And the payoff? It was huge. He landed a skilled job at a private firm and even ended up designing his own software.
Now let's look at his friend, Vilas. His story, wow, it's just one thing after another. His dad passed away when he was only 2. Then he developed arthritis, but his mom was struggling just to sell fish to make ends meet. There was no money for a doctor. School, it was never even a possibility.
And here's where you see it side by side. It's so clear. For Sakal, you see this upward spiral. All because of those early investments in his education and health, he ends up in a skilled, high-paying job. But for Vilas, it's the complete opposite. A downward spiral into the exact same low-income, unskilled work his mother did. Two friends, two totally different economic destinies.
So look, these aren't just one-off stories, one sad and one happy. They're actually perfect examples of these really powerful feedback loops that economists call virtuous and vicious cycles. Let's break down how these engines of opportunity or disadvantage really work.
Sakal's story? That's the virtuous cycle, right there in action. That initial investment in his education and his health set off this incredible chain reaction. Better skills led to higher productivity, which of course means a better salary. And that wealth doesn't just stop with him. It means he can then invest in the next generation, keeping that cycle of success going.
Vilas, on the other hand, well, he got caught in a vicious cycle. His initial disadvantage, his poor health, literally locked him out of getting an education. With no education, he was stuck doing unskilled, low-productivity work. It's a trap, and the meager income he earned just wasn't enough to ever let him afford the very things, like healthcare and training, that could help him escape.
So what is this invisible force? This thing that created such a huge gap between two friends? Well, it has a name, and honestly, it's the key to this whole explainer.
So what was it? What was the real difference maker here? What did Sakal have that Vilas was denied? It wasn't money, at least not at first. It was an investment in something much, much more powerful.
The answer is human capital. Now, the textbook definition is the stock of skill and productive knowledge embodied in a country's working people. But let's just break that down. Simply put, it's the value you create when you invest in people through things like education, training, and healthcare. It's the difference between just having labor and having skilled, healthy, productive labor. Yeah, think about it like this. A doctor, a teacher, an engineer, they're not just workers, right? All those years of training, their health, their know-how, that is the capital. That's the stuff that creates massive value for an entire economy.
And this right here might be the most important takeaway of all. A country can have all the land and all the factories in the world, but they're just useless on their own. It's the skilled, educated, and healthy people, the human capital, that unlocks the potential in everything else. Okay, so we've seen how this works for individuals like Sakal and Vilas. Now let's zoom out. Let's see how this whole idea of human capital can literally build or break entire nations.
When a government builds schools or hospitals, we tend to call it social spending. But that totally misses the point. This is an economic investment with a huge return, every bit as crucial as building a new factory or a highway. Why? Because a healthier, smarter population is a more productive population. It's that simple. And that productivity translates directly into national wealth. And the proof? It's everywhere you look. India's Green Revolution was powered by scientists and educated farmers who knew how to use new technology. The country's IT boom was built entirely on a foundation of skilled software engineers. And I mean, look at Japan, a country with almost no natural resources that became this economic powerhouse. How did they do it? Simple. They invested like crazy in their people's education and health.
So this brings us right back where we started. And it forces us to make a really important shift in how we think about things.
For a long, long time, the thinking was that a big population was a problem, a liability. It was just seen as a numbers game. More mouths to feed, more people to house, basically a constant drain on a country's limited resources.
But as Sako's story just showed us, that's a really flawed way to look at it. A population is only a burden if you let it be. If you invest in it, with things like health and education, that same population transforms into a nation's greatest asset. The people themselves become the engine for growth. So that's where we're left. The story of Sakal and Vilas. That's not just some tale from a faraway village. It's a dynamic that's playing out everywhere, in every community, in every country, every single day. And it makes you ask a pretty critical question, right? What choices are we making? How is your society investing in its people, in its single greatest asset?